Previously on Funny Science Fiction.
I don't do that voice. And they said, listen to Carrie Fisher's interviews currently. So, I'm in my car going, YouTube, Carrie Fisher, current interview.
Hello, and welcome to the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
The podcast where we use all 5 of our senses, and most of our non-senses too.
Today is Steve Rubin. Steve is an actor, producer, director, and Steve is also an author. We have Steve here today to talk about his encyclopedias of James Bond and the Twilight Zone. Both books offer in-depth information about movies, episodes, and details that you may have likely missed. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here, Steve.
Thank you, guys. I have to give a disclaimer. I am not an actor. No pretensions to being an actor there. Screenwriter, yes. Producer, yes. Promoter, yes. Author, yes. But acting, no.
Well, I'm gonna sue IMDb because they lied. That's on me. I wrote that. I blame IMDb though.
No worries, no worries. I did act once. I played a school principal in a PSA. I was very good.
Not too shabby if you do say so yourself, right?
I feel like I remember that one.
All right. So, Steve, thank you so much for being on the show. Actor or not, we're glad to have you. So, Bond. James Bond. That's perhaps the single most influential introduction in human history, in my opinion. That has been mimicked and imitated on and off the silver screen. It's been on TV. It's in books, whatever else. So, Steve Rubin, although you have several books about James Bond, what was the driving force behind the writing of a James Bond encyclopedia?
Well, I've always been a huge fan. I got to go back to being 12 years old in my room. My father comes home from a business trip. He generally was reading Westerns, and I never wanted to read Westerns. I had no interest in reading Westerns. I liked watching Westerns, but I didn't like reading Westerns. One day he plopped a paperback on my desk, Goldfinger. I started to read this book. I was a junior high school student. We called them junior highs in those days, not middle schools. And I was immediately enthralled by Ian Fleming's writing. It had a tremendous influence on me for decades, but I think that as I became a writer, and you're always looking for subjects that Bond was it. I mean, you start writing about Bond. I started writing about Bond in 1977. So let's see, that's 44 years ago, and I'm still writing about Bond. So there are very few subjects you can continue to write about for 44 years. And when Contemporary Books of Chicago approached me in 1990 and said, we've had success with a Marilyn Monroe encyclopedia, we've had a success with an Elvis Presley encyclopedia, could you do a James Bond encyclopedia? Well, I had already done what was essentially the first behind-the-scenes history of James Bond. It was published in '81 called the James Bond Films, a behind-the-scenes history. So I had a ton of material, ton of interviews, and it's been an organic process ever since. Putting together the encyclopedia, and this is the 4th edition, is just fun. It's just a lot of fun, a lot of work, particularly in finding the photographs, because even though I'm very proud of my prose, when people crack open a James Bond encyclopedia, the first thing they look at are the illustrations. And I had to conduct a worldwide search.
I believe that, because that'd be the first thing I would want to look at, because there's so much tied to James Bond that's just cool. The vehicles, the gadgets, everything else. So that makes sense to me. And that's kind of one of the things I personally love about James Bond is the mix of realism with the pinch of the unreal, because that's what it seems to be to us, the lay folk.
Although I will say that it has changed dramatically over the years. And I would say during the current Daniel Craig incarnation that Bond is more real than ever. They've really cut back on the I won't necessarily call it fantasy elements, because even the craziest Bond villains still had a touch of realism. But I think that today's audience, if you're going to go see a Bond movie, you're looking for grit and you're looking for real. I don't think you're looking for as much fantasy.
No, I completely agree with that. I think I think the era of Roger Moore was probably the most fanciful. That's fanciful. Anyway, there's a word there that I probably should be using that I probably just screwed up. But
Fantastical.
let's use that one. Okay, so I like that one. Let's use that one. But I think the Roger Moore era was probably the most fantastical. And now you have, and I think the more of the realism kind of set in with the Pierce Brosnan movies, and then very much so Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig's movies have been almost like a pure grit.
Oh yeah. And
So,
you have to look also at the competition. When Bond debuted in 1963 in the US, there was no competition. But today, you've got the Bourne series,
sure.
Mission Impossible, even the Kingsman series, which has a touch of the fantastical. You've got even the Fast and the Furious car chase movies.
Yeah.
You got to keep up with them. I think that there's a lot of imitators out there, and I think that it's getting tougher and tougher to produce a unique Bond movie.
No, I agree with you. And like I said, I grew up though watching, of course, the Connery and the Roger Moore era. I really wasn't a fan of the Timothy Dalton's movies. But one of the things I loved about Bond, like as I was saying earlier, was the pinch of real with the unreal. And it kind of reminds me in a way of, you mentioned fantasy, but science fiction. There's the gadgets, there's the cars, and with Roger Moore, there was space travel. So, in my opinion, James Bond is low-key sci-fi. So, in your opinion, what's a sci-fi universe that we might be able to see James Bond slip into as a character?
That's a loaded question, because I think that I'm kind of prone to time travel stories. Those are my favorite subgenre of science fiction. So having James Bond go back to an interesting era would be fun for me. But I do not see James Bond interacting with the Mandalorian or Captain Kirk or Doctor Who. No, I don't think that whenever James Bond veered into a touch of science fiction, and disastrously so at the end of Die Another Day,
yes,
where all of a sudden he's driving an invisible car, that was jumping the shark time for me. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's really a good answer for me on that one, because I think that I don't like science fiction and James Bond. I keep them very separate.
Okay. That's solid. See, the only way that I could tie it in, because I thought about that before I asked you this question, and the only tie-in that I could find, because I, like you, couldn't find a world or a sci-fi universe that I thought he would fit into. Star Trek and Star Wars, the two biggies, were automatically out. The only one that I could see it possibly working in, he wouldn't be a main character. And that's the Marvel universe. He would have to be an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. like Agent Coulson, like a British version of the Agent Coulson from the Marvel universe. Dressing sharp, have all kinds of cool gadgets and gear and toys and all these things, but not a main character. And so that I don't know that it would really fly. But I was just kind of curious to see what you thought about that.
Nah, I don't like it. I don't like it.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
I mean, there are elements of Marvel that kind of veer into a little bit of secret agent work, but I think here we are after all these years. I think Bond is still with us for a very good reason. Bond stays in his lane. Basically, if you know what you're going to get when you get a James Bond movie, and one of the things that really is never really stated much is these are family movies. I mean, you never see naked women, entirely naked women. You never right. hear the F-bomb. I think they want to keep their family audience. And I also think that there's enough garbage going on in the world that Bond has enough missions to last for the next 2 centuries.
Agreed.
We joke that Bond was forever. I think it's true. I mean, if I could predict what series will still be playing in the 2100s, it'll be James Bond.
I think I tend to agree with you. There's so much there that he can write, that can be written about and for him. And, it's all, and it's just, in my opinion, it just comes down to making sure you have the right actor for it. As
Right.
long as he is cast properly, it's not going to be a problem. And I remember when people, lost their hats when Daniel Craig was appointed as the next Bond, because, oh my God, a blonde Bond, what are we going to do?
I was one of those people. I said, who the heck is this guy? And a blonde? Give me a break. I'll tell you, after 10 minutes of watching Casino Royale, my jaw dropped. I said, who is this guy? And he just blew out everything in that first movie. And even though the movies have not been consistent, he's been consistently great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I remember back when Pierce Brosnan came in, I was nervous about him being Bond because I remembered the only thing I really remembered Pierce Brosnan from, in all honesty, was Remington Steele when I was a kid. And I never liked that show. And I thought, oh man, he's just going to do Remington Steele all over the place. But he didn't. I thought he did really well with it. So
Pierce is great. I don't think the movies were as great, but I think
he was better than the movies.
He was much better than the movies.
Yeah. So
one series I enjoyed reading was the Young Bond series. It was like his adventures and like the villains that he came across before becoming like an official agent, and like how even as a teen he was clever and a little bit of a rebel. Are you familiar with those?
I'm not
sure.
I am not. I'm kind of a little bit of a purist. In fact, I think I read one of the novels published after Ian Fleming's death, or maybe two, and I just didn't. It's like with the Twilight Zone. You asked me if I've seen all the color episodes, and I just kind of disavow them. Twilight Zone is black and white, and that's what I stick with, and that I won't change. But with Bond, I haven't tapped into the young Bond ideas, although I had the idea a few years ago that if they were ever going to reboot, they could do an origin story of how James Bond won his 000, which is kind of what Casino Royale is. I mean, Casino Royale is kind of an origin reboot.
Yeah, Casino Royale leading into Spectre, and there's all those have a very gritty beginning for him. Yeah.
So what would be like another character that you would like to see turned into like a young adaptation of a character?
That's a very good question. From the Bond series or anywhere?
Anywhere, or even the Bond series, yeah.
Our answer to that question is yes.
Well, they did it well with Indiana Jones. I thought River Phoenix was wonderful in that part of the movie. I would have to say it would be hard for me to think of somebody. I mean, we've seen all the superheroes kind of in a young fashion, kind of. I mean, young Spidey, and we also saw the origin kind of in Harrison Ford, a Han Solo opening. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. But I will consider the thought. I mean, another one of my favorite characters is Marty McFly, but we meet him when he is young. So
right. Kind of hard to jump back even farther. So
exactly.
Okay.
Or maybe young Hannibal Lecter.
Yes. How he developed the taste. So. All right, so let's take a minute here. I want to talk to you about another one of the books. It's a book that you co-wrote called "The Cat Who Lived with Anne Frank."
Oh,
so clearly, this book is designed to help young ones learn to combat hate and develop a sense of acceptance and diversity. But how did it come about, and what's been the reaction to the book so far?
Oh, it's a very interesting story. I mean, I have a hobby. I've been doing it since high school, where I tape full movies on audio tape. I'm probably one of the few people in California now still making cassette audio tapes. I'm very much throwback, but I play them when I'm shaving or dressing, whatever. I play them in the car. I'm always surrounded by movies. I'm such a movie person. I mean, you know how they call potheads, people who have marijuana constantly.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a movie head, basically. I
Nice.
have to have that thing.
We'll take that.
So one day I was playing the 1959 George Stevens film, The Diary of Anne Frank. And, I'd seen it several times. I mean, it's the classic story of the Jews hiding out in Amsterdam. And there's a scene in the movie where Mushi the cat goes running through, and they're chasing Mushi because they don't want him to make a lot of noise. And I said to myself, at that moment, what did the cat think of this weird situation of people tiptoeing around in the daytime and never going outside? So my friend David Miller, who's just a wonderful children's book writer, I mean, he's written scripts and he's done video games and stuff like that. David and I are just bonded. In fact, he hired me. He used to run the Criterion Collection, the outfit that makes the classic films on Laserdisc and now Blu-ray, and he hired me to do the first 3 James Bond movies on Laserdisc. So we had bonded then, literally, no pun intended. And I brought it to David, and he just loved the idea of making a children's book called The Cat Who Lived with Anne Frank, and telling the story of the attic from Mushi's point of view. It's actually inspired an animated feature we've written, which would take the story to the next step. We follow Mushi outside of the attic, and it becomes kind of a Lion King type animal story where Mushi joins the Dutch resistance against the Nazis. But in our story, metaphorically, it's the German Shepherds and the Rottweilers that are patrolling the canals. So it's a great big fantasy adventure film that we were out selling as we speak. But the book came out from Penguin, and they're very nice reviews, really nice reviews, and people have been buying it for their children to read. And it's kind of it's not your typical bedtime reading. It's not about little bunnies and cats and mice. It's more historical, but the reaction we have gotten is really good, because anything we can teach to young people about tolerance and anti-hate and racism is a good thing. And through the cat's eyes, we see the plight of the Franks and the Van Pelses as they struggle to survive. And we see a little bit of how Mushi might have viewed it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I looked at the book a little bit with the illustrations, and I thought, very well illustrated, very cute. So you got a tie in there for the young ones, and I saw a couple pictures that you guys have posted online, and because we may have lightly stalked you on Twitter, and
Sure.
where you had posted some pictures of you guys taking it to schools and things like that. And I just wanted to say kudos to you guys for writing the book, B, to making sure it got in the hands of young ones. So I think that's an amazing thing.
Well, thank you very much. And with a little luck, maybe we can get the movie going, because the movie is quite an adventure.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing that. So I think that'd be cool.
So we do need to take a minute here to discuss another one of your encyclopedias. That is, of course, the Twilight Zone Encyclopedia. So through the writing of this book, you talk about the episodes, the writers, actors, and so forth. What is your favorite story that you stumbled upon about the Twilight Zone that you can share with our listeners?
That's a very good question. I actually have a couple of different ways to answer that. I'll give you a story that you could actually play the Twilight Zone theme in the background while I'm telling it, because part of my research was developing a very good relationship with Rod Serling's widow, Carol. And one day I was over at Carol's, because she would give me access to photographs and filings, all of the contracts, so I could actually tell you how much an actor made in an episode. And one day I was asking her about Rod's kind of work methodology. How did he work? What were some of his influences? And she said, well, you should take a look at this book. So she hands me a book off the shelf, and it's a bound copy. It was published. It's a lot of his live TV shows from the live TV era, where he first made a great impact with shows like Patterns and Requiem for a Heavyweight. So she says, take that home. The preface answers all your questions. So I brought it home. I held it very tenderly in my hand. It was Rod's personal copy. I put it on my desk, and I think I had to go to a dinner or something, so I had to come back to my desk to look at my book. I was really looking forward to it. It had vanished. It had completely vanished into thin air. Nobody broke into the house. There was no earthquake that had bounced into a trash can. I looked for that book for 3 days, and I never found it again. That was probably 5-6 years ago. That is definitely a Twilight Zone type moment. But I'll give you another one. 2.5 years ago, I went to a Twilight Zone symposium in Binghamton, New York, where Rod grew up. They had all these panels and discussions, and I got to sell some books there. One of the guys I was hanging out with Nick, and I'll remember his name in a second, who knew the neighborhood very well, took me to Rod Serling's house because I wanted to take a photograph in front of the house that Rod Serling grew up in. And we took it. The lady came out who owns the house, offered to take a picture of us standing in front of the house, which is great. I said, thank you, and walked away. I'm looking at the photo later on. It's in black and white. Now, you can't create a black and white photo on an iPhone unless you actually, set it for black and white photo. Can you explain that?
That's weird.
It was weird. But getting back to the book, there are a lot of great Twilight Zone stories I learned. I think, let's see. I think it was Cliff Robertson was coming out to be in one of his 2 episodes. It was either The Dummy, where he plays the ventriloquist, or it was the one where he's the Western, person leading the wagon train for the time travel episode, 30 yards over the rim, 100 yards over the rim. And apparently he was kind of squawking. They wanted him in on a Friday. They weren't going to shoot him till Monday. He kind of stood his ground, would not fly out on the day they wanted. The plane he was scheduled to fly out on flew into the Hudson, and everybody on board was killed. So I thought that was quite something for Cliff Robertson. And then Cliff Robertson also said in an interview that when the 9/11 disaster took place in New York City, he was flying his private plane over the city at that point, and he was right near all of that. So that was interesting. Very interesting. I also learned that Bob Cummings, who stars in the first episode of season 2 about the B-25 plane in the desert, that his godfather was Orville Wright. And
that's cool.
And Cummings, who's playing the bomber pilot of a B-25 World War II bomber, had one of the first private plane licenses in the United States. So in digging down into these people's lives and learning something about them was interesting. I also discovered that some of the people had some rather dark endings. One of my favorite episodes, which was a challenging episode because Paul Douglas, who played the baseball manager in the Mighty Casey episode, which was the baseball episode. Yeah. He died. He was dying throughout his episode. And when they looked at the footage at the end of the footage, after the end of the show, he looked awful. So they decided they had to reshoot it. And that's why Jack Warden was brought in to play the manager of the Hoboken Zephyrs. But the actor who played Casey, the baseball pitcher, who actually turns out to be a robot, he was involved in a manslaughter or some kind of altercation and ended up going to prison. Wow. He may still be in prison as far as I know. So there were some stories like that. And then Gig Young, who was in one of my favorite episodes, Walking Distance, where he plays the burnt out advertising executive who takes his car into the shop and then walks down the road to his hometown. He got very depressed, killed his new wife, and killed himself. So that was very sad, very sad. Yeah, those stories, those stories are tough. And then everybody, I tried to find everybody who was alive who had been in a zone, and I got some great interviews. The book is a good companion with Mark Zakri's classic book from '82, The Twilight Zone Companion, which is the first book to really bring all the episodes in front of you. My book is more of a formal encyclopedia where there's literally an entry on everything involved zone-wise.
Nice.
Gotcha. So I think one of the most iconic scenes in all of Twilight Zone is the William Shatner scene in the plane. There's something on the wing. Something
on the wing. That's the worst Shatner impression you're ever going to hear, by the way. And you're welcome.
That's one of my favorites. There's some great stories about that. Nick Cravat, who played the creature on the wing, was a wonderful acrobatic actor. He's well known as one of Burt Lancaster's best friends. If you saw a Burt Lancaster film from the 40s or 50s, he's usually partnered with Nick Cravat. I mean, Crimson Pirate, Flame in the Arrow, those kinds of movies. Okay. To costume him as this gremlin, it wasn't the most inspired costuming. They went to Central Costumes at MGM and got a bear costume.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
I think that the 1983 reboot, where they made the feature film of those 4 episodes, I thought that they made a much better creature when they had the money to do a proper creature on the wing with the John Lithgow version of that. But there's another funny story that this was directed, by the way, by Richard Donner. Went on to direct Superman and Lethal Weapon and all those great films. Well, apparently Donner, they were working on the tank stage, because not only did they have to have a big wind machines on that wing, but they had to have water. So it had to be done on the tank. And one day Richard Donner was walking over to get a cup of coffee, and he heard a scream, and he came racing back to the set, and they looked down at the bottom of the tank, this concrete floor, and William Shatner was lying on the floor as if he had fallen and broken his neck and was dead. And people were freaking out. And then Shatner stood up and said, "Gotcha!" Moments like that can be a little crazy.
Love it.
That's a Richard Matheson episode. And Richard apparently was on an airliner looking at some clouds one day and thought he saw somebody skiing off a cloud. And I think that eventually became the idea for Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
Nice.
Well, that's cool.
That's awesome. So what are some other iconic characters like William Shatner that became famous that we may not have known of in the Twilight series?
Oh, sure. Well, Robert Redford, who had already made some live TV performances. In fact, he had starred in Rod's Holocaust drama, In the Presence of Mine Enemies, playing a young Nazi. So he comes into the episode, and after watching, there's 156 episodes, so sometimes I forget the title of it, but this is the episode where the old lady's living in this condemned building, and she gets a knock on the door, and she's very fearful about the angel of death, and it's just a New York City policeman played by Robert Redford, and it's a great episode. And I think Redford, I mean, in the history of Hollywood, is there a better looking actor when he first started out? I mean, Redford was the poster boy for poster boys. Also, Charles Bronson early in his career, the start of, I believe, the 3rd season, episode 2, with him and Elizabeth Montgomery playing an American and a Russian soldier in a burned out town. That was a cool episode. And we didn't really know much about Bronson at that time. I mean, he'd done some films, but this is pre The Magnificent Seven, pre The Great Escape.
Okay.
He's great. And let's see, just some other actors. I mean, James Franciscus, who would later go on to be Mr. Novak, and the one about the insurance executive, I forget the name of that one, but he was in an episode with Nehemiah Persoff about a U-boat that's stalking a freighter. It turns out to be a ghostly U-boat, kind of a Flying Dutchman story. They're wonderful actors all over the place. But not only do I do the lead actors, but I also, in my encyclopedia, talk about some of the supporting players who really made those episodes great. And I still, to this day, maintain that in the history of television, there has never been a better cast show than The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's go back to James Bond for a moment, and let's talk vehicles. Now, in every movie, James Bond, he's the premise of the gentleman spy, always has the coolest of cars to drive around. Always has, I mean, if it's the coolest new thing on the block, James Bond has it and it's tricked out. However, my favorite vehicle in a James Bond movie is not a car. Let me set the scene. So my buddies and I, after we got out of work one night, went to a late showing of the movie GoldenEye. And with Pierce Brosnan as Bond. And now there's a scene where Bond is chasing a car in a tank. That's right, in a tank. He busts through the wall and he goes around. And he's following this guy in Russia, in Moscow, in a tank. Now, there weren't many people in the theater, thankfully, because I probably would have been thrown out because I was yelling at the screen, "I want a tank! Give me Bond's tank!" So I was completely enamored by that. You see, I grew up. My best friends and I, we always grew up. We watched Bond like nonstop. We had one of my buddies, his family had the entire collection on VHS. And for the kids that are listening, those are old cassette tapes you'd put into a movie player and it'd play it, and then you'd have to rewind it to watch it again. So anyway, enough for the history lesson. But so Steve, for you, was there a favorite Bond vehicle that that would have made you yell at the screen? Maybe you did yell at the screen, or as a civilized human being, is it just one that you wanted really badly?
Well, I think I could hit the button for Goldfinger on most of those favorite moments, except for Bond girls. My favorite Bond girl is Claudine Auger from Thunderball. She played Domino.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's just the hottest hottie. But car-wise, the Aston Martin, I still remember sitting in the Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, which is, by the way, a theater we did not go regularly. I think for Goldfinger, that Christmas '64, that was the thing to do, go up to Grauman's and see Bond. When Q introduces the Aston Martin DB5, it's, it just sends a chill up your spine. Oh my God, look at that car. And then his explanation of the various devices was just so cool. I mean, in those days, Bond was doing things that nobody did. I mean, there was the definition of cool. And I always remember the final moment. He says, Q says, now pay attention to this. There's a little red button, and if you push it, it'll engage and fire it passenger ejector seat. And Sean Connery looks at him and says, the ejector seat, you're joking. And Q says, I never joke about my work. But the Aston Martin has kind of become the iconic Bond car, and it's come back through in the Daniel Craig series. It's kind of it's kind of a quaint car now when you look at the more modern Aston Martins, etc. But I'll tell you, I think probably toy-wise, the original was a big collectible for years, and nothing has quite done the same for it. I mean, I admire the new Aston Martins; they're very, very nice, but just something, the impact of that car, with the revolving number plates, the bulletproof screens, the machine guns, the oil slick, the smoke screen. Yeah, no, it was just very cool. I mean, everything Bondy in those days, the gadgets, they were selling the briefcase from Russia with Love with the folding rifle, and they had. There was a funny story about Thunderball. If you recall, in Thunderball, Q gives him a rebreather, a little device he puts in his mouth with little tanks on it, and good for 4 minutes, which Bond uses quite a bit because it fits into a convenient pocket. And of course, Bond has a convenient pocket. And apparently when Thunderball came out, the British Navy sent somebody to get in touch with the art department because they wanted to supply their underwater troops with that rebreather. And they had to be informed, sorry, it's just a prop.
It doesn't really exist. That's great. That's great. Well, Steve, we have very much enjoyed this conversation. And as we come to the conclusion of it, one of the things we like to do with each of our guests, before we let you get out of here, is we want to play a quiz with you.
Okay. Now,
this is going to be a 100% James Bond centered quiz. We're going to test your knowledge since wrote the whole encyclopedia and such.
Please don't ask me the caliber of guns or
nope.
No, that's a toughie. And what's the other area? Well, license plate numbers have always been not a good thing.
No, we're good there. We're not going to ask you either of those questions.
Start easy and work your way up, or
I make no promises.
Okay, all right. I'm ready. I'm a big Jeopardy watcher, so I'll pretend I'm on Jeopardy.
All right, cool. Now, here's the thing, though. There's 5 questions. If you get 3 of them right, we're going to send you one of our Red Shirt Widows and Orphans coffee mugs. Okay?
I love it. That's great. That's fabulous.
If you get all 5 right, actually, if you get 4 out of 5 right, we're going to send you the mug, and we'll send you this book, which is Drayton Allen's book. Drayton Allen is the founder of our funny science fiction group. He's an author, and he wrote that book. It's kind of got a little bit of a Star Trek lean to it, which is, of course, where the red shirts comes from. So now, of course, there has to be a consequence if you don't get at least 3 right. The consequence is we take a picture of your face, we make a meme out of you, we post it to our group. Do you agree with these terms and conditions, sir?
I agree. I'm going to jump into it full frontal.
All right, do it. All right, Nick, hit him up.
What was the name of the estate that Ian Fleming wrote the James Bond books at?
And these are multiple choice, by the way. I forgot to tell you that.
Yeah, it was either Fleming Acres, GoldenEye, or Moonraker, and you got it.
Oh, did he say GoldenEye? I didn't hear him.
Yeah, he said it like right after I.
Oh, well. This might not be as difficult as I thought it was going to be. All right, you might just go 5 for 5. All right, so in which book was James Bond killed? Was it Thunderball, Dr.No, or From Russia with Love?
I would say From Russia with Love.
Correct. Yeah. Dr.No, he was brought back to life.
Right. People don't realize, by the way, that Fleming was so upset with his book sales, he killed off Bond and From Russia with Love and was not going to pick up the pen again. Raymond Chandler, the great American detective thriller author, who was a good friend of Fleming's, told him to keep it going, and that's why he's brought back in Dr.No.
Oh, interesting. That's cool.
So, who was the first actor to play James Bond?
Barry Nelson on TV, 1954.
Wow. All right. Man, I thought that was going to... My favorite part about that one is that he wasn't even James Bond in that. He was Jimmy Bond because he was an American.
Card sense, Jimmy Bond.
That's right. All right. Well, that, sir, earned you a coffee mug, so you get that. All right. So which Bond film has won the most Academy Awards? The Man with a Golden Gun, Skyfall, or Dr.No?
Skyfall.
That's right. 5 of them, in fact. In 2012. So that gives you the coffee mug, and Nick will show you your other prize because he has it right there, the book. You get them both. So hang on, after we're all done here, we'll get your mailing address and all that fun stuff so we can send those off to you. And to see if you can go 5 for 5.
Just for
Nick,
funsies.
This is for funsies at this point, yes.
Who is the only actor to drop a knee during the gun barrel opening sequence? Was it David Niven, Barry Nelson, or George Lazenby?
I'm going to say George Lazenby.
Yes.
That's correct.
And fun fact, all of these actors only played Bond once.
All right, I have one more question. I'm going to throw it at you because you hit all these other ones. So if you could get those, you'll get... I have confidence that you'll get this. Who played Bond more often? Was it Sean Connery or Roger Moore?
It's a tie. They both did 7.
Yeah, dang, you're good at this. All right. Well, I guess if you write an encyclopedia about something, you better have some knowledge.
And here's an interesting fact I discovered. Did you know that the first 5 James Bond movies were released alphabetically?
Huh.
Dr.No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, and You Loved It Twice.
Yeah, that's a little bit of mind blowing right there. I had no clue. I was just going to try and stump. I was trying to stump you with that, a little bit of a trick question because on that Bond and Moore question, because yeah, the answer is 7, even though Connery's last film was an unofficial Bond movie.
Right.
So
Never say never. James Bond, and I think UA's now acquired that film. So even though it wasn't produced officially, it's now part of their canon.
Yes, I agree. So no, yeah. So guys, if you haven't had an inclination that you need to go get the James Bond Encyclopedia, I think Steve just proved the fact that that's a book that you need to own, because clearly he did his research and getting to this point, not only as a fan, but as an author. And then you'll want to check out his Twilight Zone books as well.
I will say to your listeners, there's a famous bookshop in Los Angeles called Larry Edmunds Movie Bookshop. It's kind of like the center for all movie knowledge. And I have a little promotion going with them that if you want a signed copy of my book, go to larryedmunds.com, and that's EDMUNDS. And you can order the book, and then I go down there and I sign it specifically to the people who order it. So you don't
That's awesome.
You don't have to go into a store. You can socially distance from home. Just order the book, and it's also available on Amazon and all the usual book sites, and it's in the stores. The Twilight Zone Encyclopedia as well, also carried at Larry Edmunds. Well, I have Facebook presence. The James Bond Movie Encyclopedia, the official title is on. It has a page on Facebook. I have my own page, Steve Rubin. I also do a lot of posting. I publish This Day in James Bond Movie History, usually twice a week. And in fact, today I'm posting Derek Medding's birthday. Derek Meddings was one of the great special effects guys who did a lot of the miniatures in the early Bond movies. So yes, I have those presence. I have presence on Instagram. I have presence on LinkedIn, and I don't tweet much, but I have a Twitter presence.
All right, we will make sure we put those descriptions down below so that everyone else can find those.
All right, cool. Yeah, no, and guys, we need you to remember that subscribing is the single most important thing that you can do to make sure that we get amazing guests like Steve. We get to have these cool stories and background information and some funny moments for you to listen to laugh to, and enjoy your day with. So please subscribe if you haven't already. And also go check out Steve's work, because he's got some really cool stuff, not just what you're seeing here. You were going to say something, Steve?
No, I was just going to say how much fun it was with you guys. I can see why you have a successful podcast, because it's just, you guys are a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And, you know, guys, if you're not happy with the content, if you're not having fun like Steve has been having fun, and you're not happy with the content of our videos, just let us know, and we're going to have Steve here get us in contact with that Bond villain, Jaws, and he's going to eat through your fiber cables at home. No more internet means no more issues. You're all set.
Well, thanks again, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much for being here.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye. Our show is brought to you by our charity sponsor, the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund. Imagine the comfort that you'll give Red Shirt crewman number 002. And he'll know that when he puts on the red shirt and sent on a training mission to evade British SAS patrols and penetrate the radar installations on Gibraltar, getting shot 6 minutes into episode 14, that he didn't leave his family destitute and without hope, because the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund has his back and 3 fingers.
But none of his toes.
On behalf of the rest of the hosts of Funny Science Fiction, we'd like to thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to be a guest on one of our future episodes, please contact us by means of our Facebook group, Funny Science Fiction. You can find us on Twitter or Instagram using the handle @FunnySciFi, or you can go to DraytonAllen.com and click the Contact Me link at the bottom of the page. Thanks again. Hope you enjoyed the episode.